Welcome. I'm John Halcyon Stinn. It is such a treat to spend this moment with you. I wanted to speak today a little bit about suicide. Now, I heard some news this weekend that kind of shook me a little bit and kind of altered my viewpoints on suicide. Now, suicide is something that I have thought about and talked about and made many shows and conversations and decisions and thoughts about the concept of suicide. Suicide is something that I feel pretty intimate with as a concept. And one of the reasons is because I actually think about my suicide as a tool for coping. And before you get too worried about me, let me explain what I mean. Sometimes when I am overwhelmed, I will put suicide on the table to give me perspective, to give me an awareness of how many options I actually have. Because sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, it's because I feel like I don't have choices, or I feel like I'm trapped, or I feel like things will never change, or whatever the case is. But if I put suicide on the table, then I look at the spectrum of my choices and I go, oh my gosh, if suicide is an option, then why not entertain the thought of donating my life to some charity? Why not, tattoo my face? Why not? I mean, there are just so many crazy things you can try or surrender to or dedicate or spend effort in all these different directions of service or selfishness. There's so many choices that once I consider all those things, then suicide suddenly becomes not on the table anymore. So I've used it as a tool to kind of shake up my headspace from a feeling of being trapped or in a rut. And there's been times in the last year or so when I've heard stories or heard about suicides in my community or friends of friends or people that I'm kind of connected to in some way. And I'll admit that there have been times when I've felt some frustration or even anger at someone who's committed suicide. Obviously, I think that's and the thought that sometimes goes through my head is like, that's so selfish, right? We've probably all thought that. It's so selfish. And one of the things, I don't think it's necessarily selfish to decide that you want to kill yourself. The selfish thing in these past examples was thinking about like, well, how selfish to do it in a public place where other people have to deal with it, or how selfish to do it in a messy way that suddenly your family has to deal with this cleanup, or how selfish it is to do it at an event that's then going to have legal repercussions to the people who want to continue on with hosting these parties and events. And I think it's easy to get into that story of evaluating this decision that a person made and being critical of that choice. So this weekend, the story that I heard that kind of shook me up was about a woman who was a elementary school teacher who walked in front of a train. And she has 2 young children. And when I try to get my head around this thing, there's so many better ways that she could have done this. She could have quit her job as a teacher and then killed herself, so that there's now not these, however many dozens of children that have to be told or figure out or have to process this news. The school still doesn't know how or what to say. All the parents are like, what do we say? So what a crazy decision to make. Beyond selfish. That's not even bringing to the equation 2 young children. Or the people on this train that had to be taken out and moved on buses. The poor conductor who's on the horn and can't stop in time. the number of people who this choice affected horrifically is staggering. And so the more I think about that, I'm like, that cannot be explained by selfishness. That can only be explained by sickness. There's no possible rational, logical thought process that can get you to the outcome of the right thing to do to end my suffering is to step in front of this train right now. The only way you can get there is through a oily, dirty filter of depression or worse. And I know that this to be true because I was depressed for many years. And it took me a long time to understand the difference between feeling depressed and being depressed. If you feel depressed, then you make a decision about what you're going to do. If you are depressed, it's not like you feel a certain way. And this is something that I didn't understand. I didn't get even while it was happening to me until I went through a process of being on medication and feeling differently, and then forgetting meds and having things happen. So let me just see if I can explain this. So when I was depressed, I didn't have a thought that I'm a loser or I suck. I simply saw the world as a place that sucked and that I was a loser and that I always mess things up and I never do the right thing and I always let people down and I never follow through. Side note, that's a great trick to figure out if you are depressed or in a funk or your brain is not thinking and working ideally, is if you start saying always, never, those are thoughts. That's not reality. So I would have these experiences where I didn't feel bad. Things were bad. There was no thought that, oh, I will feel better. This is the way things were, and they always were. And there was simply no, there was no separation between the thought and the experience and the reality of it. And so over a period of many years of medication and feeling the difference as I was on medication and then forgot meds and slipped into this. And I didn't suddenly, if I missed my meds, I didn't feel frustrated. I didn't feel anxious or upset. I simply, every once in a while, I would be like so angry at myself and others and so frustrated with things and things just sucked and everything would never, and I would hear myself saying, and I go, wait, everything's horrible. I'm a total loser. Have I missed meds? I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed meds for 2 times in a row, and that was 2 days ago, and now this is like where my body chemistry caught up to it, and now I'm feeling it, but it's not feeling, it is. My reality was totally warped by that. And so that awareness, combined with a practice of studying and learning about New Thought and mindfulness and things like Byron Katie's The Work, the process of recognizing a thought and how we think thoughts, which is a different thing than reality. That for a long time my mantra was the world doesn't suck. I just feel like the world sucks right now. Even if that wasn't what I was feeling, I would tell myself that. It's like, you can't trust yourself. Don't trust your brain. Don't trust your brain. And that's the other thing of just studying over time the way that the brain works and the very kind of almost quaint and limited ways that the brain draws connections between things and makes assumptions and makes things. It really takes the wind out of any powerful belief that I might have. And I think that can be a very healthy thing. And so I eventually got off meds entirely, and I'm off meds now as I have this toolkit of being aware of thoughts and recognizing when I'm having a thought, and these tricks like when I hear myself say always never. And just time and time and time starting to have more and more examples of when I've been in a place where my perceptions turned out to be false, and losing a little bit of that absolute faith in my own experience, recognizing that it is clouded by thoughts and mental perceptions. And so it's from that place that I re-experienced the concept of suicide this weekend, and kind of had additional compassion for someone who made this decision not out of selfishness, but out of a completely warped perception of reality. There's simply no explanation for why a mother of young children and a teacher with a classroom full of kids and a family could choose to end their life in the way they did. And I think maybe there is a lesson here in the way that we look at all people and all choices, and that projecting our logic, our way of thinking, onto the way people are acting in any moment is a recipe for misunderstanding, and is a recipe to miss an opportunity to be compassionate. And maybe that compassion we can shine on ourselves as well, and recognize that we're not always thinking straight either. So, if you are ever feeling dark, and it doesn't, let me say that now. If you ever are certain that the world is dark, and you are certain that you are a loser, a fraud, whatever word you want to put in, remember that those are thoughts. And even if you can't see it in the moment, those thoughts are temporary. And on the other side of this dark valley, even though it feels like this isn't a valley, this is the way the earth is. No, it is a valley. And you have to have faith and trust another voice inside you, maybe. Or maybe a note that you put on your mirror saying, it's not really this dark. So hopefully you're not in a dark space right now, so you can write that sticky note. But if you are in a dark space right now, let me be the sticky note and say, it's not really this dark. You're doing okay. You're going to get through this. You might be exactly where you're supposed to be. You might be learning exactly what you need to give you the tools and experience so that you can be compassionate and kind and loving in all the adventures of the rest of your long life. So thank you for having the courage to cross this valley. I love you. Let's have a hug. Grab yourself by the shoulders. Let's have some gratitude for this amazing physical form. And be aware that inside this physical form is a collection of identities and labels, and sometimes we get so caught up in those thoughts, and sometimes it seems like that's all that's real, but beneath all that, beneath the physical form and the personalities and all the stories of what we should and shouldn't do and be, we are just right. We are divine light. We are rays of love. And our job is to just sand and smooth and allow that love to shine through. Let's take 3 breaths, just letting that love shine through us. Shining so bright that it lights up the dark paths that we or others are walking. In through the nose. On behalf of Grandpa Caleb and all the Love Warriors, happy Hug Nation. I love you. Namaste.